Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Tucker Miller. Tucker is the CEO of Onward Leadership. She's the author of the book, The First 4 Words, and she leverages her background in law, HR, and senior leadership to teach her executive clients how to execute the conversations they've been avoiding well. And I'm really excited to get into this conversation with her to learn more about her techniques, her approaches, and how she guides people to be so successful in these everyday high stakes negotiations we all participate in. The conversation is going to go in many different directions, including how to help people get past the fears that they're using really as rationalizations, not to have the conversations, and addressing the real reasons that are stopping them from engaging. The power of preparing even just the first 4 words prior to engaging in a conversation, understanding the role that context plays in all of these conversations, the 4 conversations leaders should learn to master, and so much more. It's an exciting conversation. I really appreciate her sharing her time and expertise, and I'm very happy to share it with you all today. So thank you all again for being here for another episode. We truly appreciate it. While you're here, please take a moment, like the episode, share the episode, subscribe to the podcast so you know when the next episode drops next week. We really appreciate it. And of course, please check out our sponsors. Head over to humantel.com. That's where you can enter the code INQUASIVE25 for the best in class online training to recognize when people's emotions are shifting by identifying changes in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. For the professional interviewers, you can head over to certifiedinterviewer.com, where you can learn all you need to know about both the International Association of Interviewers and the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. And while you're online, please check out inquasive.com. And that's where you can learn more about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more, to teach them the techniques necessary to unlock hidden value in all of their high stakes conversations. We appreciate you being here week after week. Thank you so very much. So without further ado, I introduce to you, Tucker Miller. Tucker, it is a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And thank you for having me, Michael.
Oh, my pleasure. I know you're busy. You carved out the hour to be here today. I'm grateful for that. And I really am excited to learn from you and what you do. So as we were reviewing the information and getting ready for the show, I was really intrigued by the concept of the first 4 words. You know, as you and I were talking prior to hitting the record button, which I feel like we probably could have done for an hour if I didn't just say, okay, let's record. It does feel like that in a lot of ways, we're trying to achieve very similar goals as we engage with people, maybe a little bit differently, of course, but we're trying to achieve similar goals. And I do believe, without wanting to step on your toes at all, that the introduction or how we start any interaction goes a long way to influencing the outcome. So I would love to start the question there, if start the conversation
Sure.
there, if you don't mind, with the question, as we're thinking about starting our conversation, what role do the first 4 words play?
Well, there's certainly the tone and the things that we say at the beginning of the conversation, but the actual problem that I was first confronted with trying to solve is in working with my clients, I kept ending up having conversations about the conversations they wouldn't start. Even after we talked about it, even after we'd agreed, even after they said it was necessary and we planned out the conversation that they would have, when I followed up with them as an executive coach working with leaders, I would ask how it went. And all too often, it just didn't. So, that led me to what is the problem? And what's interesting is what I heard them tell me pretty consistently, the problem wasn't the problem. They kept telling me I didn't know what to say. Now, we'd already planned the conversation. We'd already talked about how to get it going and how it might play out and why it was important to do. These are also, in most cases, the people I'm working with are high-level, experienced, mature leaders, very well educated. So when they would say to me, I didn't know what to say, I knew it wasn't a vocabulary issue. They knew what to say. So the real underlying problem is, why didn't they say not only what they knew how to say, but especially what they knew they needed to do in order to get the results that they wanted to get? So that's kind of the first thing is when we think about how to start the conversation, the first thing I would have people think about is, what are the conversations that you're avoiding? Because those are probably the richest ones. That's the other side where we might get a promotion. We might be able to change things in our community. We might be able to move or have a family. All those things are usually on the other side of the conversation that we're sometimes too afraid to have. So when I started to think about what is the problem to solve here, it wasn't what do I need to say, it was how do I help people get past the fear, the hesitation, the discomfort. And that's really the genesis of the first 4 words, because as I tried to think about what's a solution for that, I thought there must be a way to make it fun. I'm a big fan of let's lighten things up. I mean, life's hard enough, right? We're already uncomfortable. We're already nervous. And you think about a leader having a high stakes conversation. If you're at a certain level within an organization, that high stakes is everyone sees the fail. I mean, it's very visible. It's what people talk about. So how do you get past the fear? And I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm just going to give you this added piece. And then I'm so interested in hearing your reaction. And so I was thinking about how do you gamify it? This was during COVID, and I was just hiking all over my neighborhood trying to solve this problem. And a weird thing came to mind. Name that tune. I watched this when I was a lot younger. I think there's a newer version on TV now. I haven't seen it, but there used to be this part in that game where contestants would go back and forth saying, after a description of some tune that they were supposed to guess, I could name that tune in 8 notes. And someone else would say, well, I could name it in 6 notes. I could name it in 5 notes. And then they would see if they were right. And I thought, I wonder if gamifying a conversation starter to make it just enough words to get it started that you wouldn't have a good reason not to try. What's the shortest distance between being on the couch and in the conversation? I started to think, what's that sweet spot? So I came home with this idea, and I had adult kids living at home during COVID, and I put out a piece of butcher paper on the table, and I said, I have this idea, and I want everyone to start listening, and let's just map out what are some of the words that or phrases that we hear. And I was doing it with my clients, and consistently 4 words seem to indicate a sweet spot. And there's a whole lot that you can do with 4 words. So I started asking my clients, that conversation that you didn't have when you didn't know what to say, let's pretend that you do know what to say. And if you could say it in as few as 4 words, that was the magical phrase. If you could do it in as few as 4 words, how would you start it? Suddenly, we move from that sort of reptilian fear-based brain to the puzzle-solving cognitive brain that loves crosswords and Sudoku and all that. And you know what? They had answers. And it seemed so ridiculously simple. Some people were energized and wanted to go ahead and try it. And other people just wanted to have the conversation with those 4 words to prove me wrong. I don't care.
Either way.
I got them in and testing it. And, it's really that willingness. This goes back to your initial question. So I went sort of a circuitous route here. But, what's the easiest entry point to getting more of what you want to achieve? So you think about tone of voice, picking your right moment, engaging the person that you want to speak with, and then having a simple phrase to get it started. That's really what the 4 words is about. It's more of a concept and a strategy than it is a script, but it's just enough to get it going. And then I love what you talk about is now we're starting to have a conversation because you've got somebody's attention. Now we can start listening.
I love that. And it's even just building momentum, getting the ball rolling, pick a metaphor, analogy, whatever. But like you said earlier, like getting off the couch. The longer I sit on the couch, the harder it is to get off.
Yep.
So, but once I'm off, if I can keep moving, then I'm more likely to stay moving. I'm pretty sure there's laws of science about an object in motion, and it applies to everything
Yeah.
that we do.
Yeah.
When we're not in motion, it's hard to get. And you talked about the fears, the fear of everybody seeing the fair, the fear of failure, excuse me. I can't even talk today. The fear of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you this too. When you're talking about, they were afraid, why didn't they do it? The reasons they give you are not the real reasons why they didn't do it. My guesses were that one was going to be I didn't have time, which we all know is code for I didn't make the time, which we all know is code
Absolutely.
for I didn't feel it was valuable enough to make any adjustments in the schedule I was already comfortable with. Like that's what they're really saying. So the time piece was one. The uncomfortableness with the delivery, I would guess, would be the second. But in reality, my other guess, or I guess next guess, would be that if they're uncomfortable with the delivery, it's because one of two things, maybe both. They're either uncomfortable delivering the message, rightfully so, and or maybe more, they're uncomfortable with how the message might be received.
Absolutely. I had one person say, well, I didn't have the conversation because this is a combo of what you just said, Michael. I didn't have time for the conflict. They'd already made up their mind how it was going to turn out. So you got the double, how many there in terms of excuses. I thought that was pretty creative. I just didn't have time for the conflict. I was like, okay.
How about don't start the conflict and then you got time for the conversation? It's like, life doesn't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right. That's right.
But I to circle back to your, I think, question, I love the concept of getting the ball rolling and getting moving. I love having the concept of, I feel like if people, and this is certainly true for me, if I know where my first couple moves are, I can let the rest fall into play. It's almost like a combination of as long as I know where to end and I have a reasonable idea on how I'm going to start, everything in the middle can sort of take care of itself. Because if I start in the general direction, that should take me where I want to end. Now, whatever you say or wherever you go next, I can deal with and eventually circle around. So if we can help people focus on the right outcomes and then give them the right starting point, hopefully we can reduce that stress and help them be more successful.
Absolutely. There's a quote that I'm attached to that I put in the book. There's actually two potential people to attribute the quote to. I'll tell you who I picked in a moment. One is Aristotle. The other is Mary Poppins. But once begun, half done. I mean, that is like the perfect piece. And what I found is people say, well, once I say this, what's going to happen next? I said, the conversation. We're all ready for the conversation, but the worst results come from the conversations you just simply won't have. So,
and you hit so many great examples in the beginning. It's not just professional, but it's personal too. Like, how many things could we have achieved faster, easier, more efficiently if we just had the guts, and this is me too, had the guts to sit down and talk about it. And sometimes my wife may or may not listen to this conversation. The conversations at home are the hardest because we have more to lose. Like, if I botch a professional conversation, now there's degrees to that, of course, but if I botch a professional conversation, okay, it's a job, I can compartmentalize that, whatever. But if I botch a conversation at home, well, those consequences are on a whole different level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're literally living with them day in and day out. So, finding a way to kind of enter that conversation and certainly navigate it once you're in it. And that's the other thing is that once you use the forward phrase to get it started, if that's what it takes, or 5 or 6 words. We're not trying to be rigid or gimmicky about this, but once you get it started, some of those forward phrases might be also nice to have in your toolbox for if it gets stuck or if it's starting to escalate. Let's take a pause is a really nice one that just having some simple strategies in place before you go in just kind of reduces our own anxiety level about the conversation. And when we're calmer, the person across from us is usually calmer. You probably see that all the time in the listing.
Oh, amen. I just spoke with a woman earlier this week, and she is a SANE nurse, so a sexual assault nurse. And she talks about how peacefulness is contagious.
I love that. Yeah.
I'm going to steal it from her for sure.
Yeah.
So Jackie, I'll give
That
you credit for as
message,
long as I can remember you said it. And then eventually I'm going to assume it was mine. But
that
it's 100,
message needs to go to the world for sure.
no, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
Generally,
Yeah.
somebody else can escalate, but if they're the only ones in the conversation escalating, eventually they have to fully commit to the bit, which is probably going to be counterproductive, or come back down to where we are.
Yeah.
And I often find in a lot of these high stakes conversations, if one person's calm and one isn't, at some point, the one who isn't starts thinking, well, what do you know that I don't? Like, why
Yeah.
are you so calm here? What's going on that I can't see? And that starts to bring them back to the table.
Absolutely. You know, I used to be I've had many careers within this one life, but I used to be in human resources, and I would have people sometimes come in and, with a problem that they were really, really upset, and you can just imagine being so upset that you're saying things, not you personally, but someone is saying, I just want to kill him, or I just wish I could punch him in the face and stuff. And no one hears the problem anymore, that they're coming in to have resolve, because what they're saying and their demeanor becomes its own separate problem.
Mm-hmm.
So you just sit there and hopefully, if they're not escalating more and more, you hopefully get it to a place where they spin themselves out. And then you address the current problem, which is that they have a short fuse. And that might be the solution to the bigger issue, if that's what's been manifesting somewhere else out in the workplace.
Potentially. And I love how you said, let them spin themselves out. A lot of times when we get into these types of conversations, if somebody is that upset, right, wrong, doesn't matter. If they're that upset, they're probably not going to let us talk until they feel like they've said their piece. So I may as well, to your point, let them go, let them spin himself out, wait till we hear, and now I can go. But if I haven't heard that, they're still gas in that tank. They're not done yet. And until they're done, we're not going to get anything productive here. And that's a great point. A couple of years ago now, I was at a community event here where I live, and the presenters were two moms. And the title of their presentation had to do with special education. They both had special needs kids. And I really was interested in what they had to say. But it turned out the majority of what they had to say was how angry they were with how one particular school treated their kids. Now, I'm not their parents. I'm not the kids. I wasn't there. I don't know. But to your point, what could have been a very credible piece of a bigger presentation that led to the necessity of these other alternatives just felt like they were venting. And after a while, their credibility is kind of washed. I mean, their credibility as a mom of a child with special needs will be there forever. But in this particular topic, making this particular recommendation, like, now you just sound like a really angry person. And for the record, I've been a really angry person. I understand that happens, but it's taking away from what we're trying to do now. And earlier you talked about the power of like these little strategies, the 4 words.
Yeah.
You can use it to start a conversation, but you can use it to restart a conversation.
That's right.
Which I thought was a fantastic thing. Like maybe it's derailed, or we hit a dead end, or we didn't go the way we thought it was going to go. So we can kind of jumpstart it in the middle. I'm curious, and I'll admit my first assumption was maybe she's got like, these are my 4 words. These are the ones that I use more often than not. Sometimes there can be things where that works. But I do like how it's more of a gamification. Okay, you're having a tough time starting a conversation. What 4 words do you think would help you get going? Now it becomes a problem-solving exercise, like all these things. I love it. I am curious, much like the exercise you did with your kids on the butcher paper and you wrote all these phrases down. Are there 4-letter phrases or combinations that tend to come up more often than not that in your feedback appear to be helpful in the context they were used?
There are some really easy, ready to go starters for anybody that I might work with who is like, I just can't think of anything. I just can't think of anything. So I was talking to, this was a realtor, and he called me up and he said, I just don't get this. I just don't see how it'll work. Can you give me an example? And I said, yeah. how about this? Let's have a conversation. And his face just kind of relaxed, and he sat back and he thought about it and he said, yeah, I think that would work. I mean, there it's so simple. It would be easy to shrug off, is that who wouldn't think of that? But the reality is he hadn't been thinking of it. So let's have a conversation. We can solve this together. Let's take a look. They're just really simple entry points. Do you have a minute? Those are great ways to start that lower the stakes for everybody, because depending on the situation and the context, as you talked about, if your boss is coming in to talk to you, in certain situations, depending on what else is going on, the very presence of that person calling you up or being in your office has already escalated a situation before words were even said.
For a fact.
So you think about what's a way to just immediately reduce any kind of defensiveness or panic, and we're just going to engage with each other. No big deal. We can solve this. May I provide feedback? Simple things that we don't come in blasting. You really blew it when you have that, or why did you ask that question? Kind of coming in to just allow people the space to really hear what you're saying. I work with so many people who say, nobody's hearing me. And when I start to talk with them about all of what they're not being heard about, I said, there's so much stuff and energy that's coming at people. They're already trying to figure out how they're going to react and respond before they've even heard what you have to say. So that's the other, if you can kind of shorten it up and just allow some of this space for people to just calm down. We're all a little reactive these days. We read about it all the time. So just knowing that and understanding your position might in itself, no matter how nice and reasonable you are, escalate things in ways that you don't anticipate. That's a great place to start. I've worked with a lot of leaders who said, but I'm such a nice guy. I'm so nice. And I said, you truly are nice, but do you have any idea how many barriers I went through to get up to the 50th floor and past your gatekeepers and the security guard down and the elevator ride up that required a key card? All those things, no matter how nice you are, really escalate the emotional grab of this conversation that we're trying to have right now. And then you're like, okay, circumstantially, and in the world, as we said, circumstantially, there are all kinds of triggering events. So just knowing that it's not you necessarily, but you have the power to bring some of that peace that you referenced earlier, but just kind of come in soft, a little bit easier, a little bit slower.
Yeah, and you can control the temperature, try to control the emotions. May I throw one out that I think should be avoided? I'd love your feedback on it. I generally would beg people, especially leaders, not to start an important conversation by saying, come in, sit down, shut the door.
The worst.
Yeah, can we just cross that one off the list, please?
Yeah, or hold it right there. I don't have the time. I mean, there are a whole category of shutdown. But it's interesting that you say that, because I have also a list of forward phrases that I've noted over time that I have not seen anyone really deliver them very effectively unless it's a comic on stage that we've all paid to listen to. They get away with anything. And part of what's funny is that they can get away with the things that we can't get away with. But over my dead body, it's not my job. Those tend to, in the same vein of what you're saying, just shut it down. I don't even want to hear what you have to say. Talk to the hand.
Yeah. Or sometimes the finger, depending on the situation.
True.
Yeah. I think one of the, and you likely see this as well, one of the realizations that I feel like leaders have, and I use leaders in air quotes, like people in any type of either official or unofficial position with influence over others, that one of the things that's difficult for them to realize is that their title alone motivates people to be less honest, timely, and thorough with the information that provide. It has nothing to do with you as a person. It has to do with what
Right.
people in your role have the power to do.
That's right.
And then when we look at the start of conversations, from all of my previous life experience that I'm bringing in and making assumptions and predictions, maybe as a leader, I've got some influence over some of that based on time we spent together, but I likely have at most influence over a very little of it. It could be none. The introduction, how did we get here together? And then when that conversation starts, to your point, they're listening to figure out what's this about? Where is this going? What does this have to do with me? So how we start there is extremely
Right.
important to try to bring them to a point where they are willing to listen. I think for me, and I'd love your feedback on this, is the reason why I'm throwing it out, is I love starting as many conversations as possible with thank you.
I
Thank
love
you for
it.
taking the time. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for stepping away from whatever. Thank you, or I appreciate. Just if I can start there, I feel like most of the time when people are called in for a conversation, whatever that might be about, probably the last two words they expected to hear right away were thank you or I appreciate. So we can
Right.
start there. We can start working our way back
Right.
to whatever we need to achieve.
Yeah. And then you add it, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for
Yeah.
your feedback. I mean, thank you for the very thing that you probably thought was too scary to give me. Thank you for that. So gratitude is the grease. There's
I
probably a
like
more
that.
eloquent way to
I
say
like
that,
that.
but it really can ease things a lot. And it's one of the, not only is it a fast way to de-escalate any kind of defensiveness or nervousness, it's also a really powerful tool in continuing the conversation. So if you thank me for this, let me tell you a little bit more about what's going on. So I used to do quite a bit of investigations in the HR legal capacity, and using that thank you, not to manipulate, but to reassure, to encourage. And we talk a lot about empathy and psychological safety. Gratitude is so key to helping people feel safe about coming forward with information that's important to them or important to others in the context of something that you're trying to solve.
Oh, amen. And to your point, especially in any context, but especially in that one, thanking them for, I guess, lack of a better term, the emotion behind their
Yeah.
statement. So
Yeah.
thank you for being brave enough to have that, to share that with me. Thank you for being open enough. This is something like this is never easy for two people to sit down and talk about. I really appreciate you being comfortable with the vulnerability to, like, those types of things. Like, okay, so that's, if I sit here and say, wow, you're really being brave. Thank you. That can almost come across patronizing. But when I say thank you for the bravery necessary to share with me
Yeah.
that, now,
Yeah.
because I'm acknowledging that, we can continue
Yeah.
to build and go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Another phrase along those lines is, I know this isn't easy. I know this is hard. And thank you, where you're acknowledging in the way that you're saying.
Yeah. There was when I was sort of related, but a little bit of a turn. When I was on your website getting prepared for the conversation, I saw something that you wrote, which I thought was another great way to say something. And I feel like ties into this a little bit when we're talking about getting the message out in a way that it's received at least positive enough to keep the conversation going. And for many of us, whether it's a leadership role, whether we're dealing with a customer, whether it's an investigation, as a parent, all kinds of things, we can sit down and say things to people that we don't necessarily mean to be negative or create conflict, but they could be received that way. So I know you talk about how to help people. Let me see if I say this right. Say what they mean without being mean. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So how do
Yeah.
we do that?
That's a really great question. And I think sometimes people think if I'm really caring and empathetic, it's so soft, I can't be effective anymore. But if we have a human-centric orientation, and I know you do from your work, I do from my work, kindness is the key. And so how do you do that? You don't have to be abrupt and mean. And that's actually one of the things I noticed when we talk about a forward phrase and that sweet spot, I've had people who said, well, isn't it more efficient to just answer with 2 words? If 4 is good, maybe 2's better. And you think about, no way, hard pass. I mean, there's so many examples. And this might steer a little bit away from your question, but it brings to mind, I was working with this woman and she said, I'm a New Yorker and I married a Midwesterner. Now, I'll let everyone else fill in whatever stereotypes, but I'll share what her observations were. She said, I come from a world where we're in a hurry. We want to do things quick and we say what we mean in as few words as possible. And then I married my husband and I'll give the answer in 2 words or less, or yes, no. And then he asked me all these questions. The answer I gave should have ended the conversation, and instead it propels him into more and more questions. And I said, well, is it possible that in your yes or no, there's a tone to it that might sound brusque, or even if you're doing it in a soft, gentle, loving way, is it perhaps possible that he's not getting enough context to know for sure that you've really agreed or not agreed with the thing that he put in front of you? And she said, well, I'm pretty clear, but I don't know. I said, what if you were willing to just expend a little bit more energy and give him 4 words instead of 1 or 2? Would you be willing to have that experiment? She said, okay. So she came back and she said, I found myself counting a lot when I responded to him. It's handy, 4 fingers here. And she said, you know what? When I started answering a little bit slower, a little bit more thoughtfully, and with just a few more words, we ended the conversation when he asked a question and I gave the answer. And then we moved on. And so I think sometimes we're a little bit brusque in our tone or in our brevity where it's counterproductive. And being caring means being a little bit more clear, but not verbose.
Yes, I'm a big believer, and I'll welcome your feedback on everything I'm about to say, that efficiency is the enemy of effective communication. So really what I'm saying when I'm saying I'm being efficient is I'm prioritizing saving my time now at the expense of accurately building the relationship or creating the outcome later. And if earlier you brought up, when leaders have conversations with multiple people and feel like nobody's listening to me, well, who's the lowest common denominator in that situation? Or who's the only common variable in all of these conversations? So let's start there and work backwards. But often the direct path is the path of most resistance. And one of the things that, and I'm fortunate for a million things, especially in this realm, but coming from the world of interview and interrogation, which is a bit unique, the techniques that we used were oftentimes essentially like a 5 to 10 minute setup to ask one question. And then the answer to that question to kind of set the tone for wherever we go next and how the conversation plays out. So I could sit down and ask you a question about your dishonest activity. Hey, nice to meet you, Tucker. How are you? I got to ask you about bam. And as long as you have 3 active brain cells in your head, you're going to deny, you're going to object, you're going to obfuscate, you're going to defend yourself somehow, some way. But if I can take 5 to 10 minutes and I can build some credibility and I can build some curiosity and I can help you save face, and then I can ask the question where you're like, oh, well, actually here. And now we're moving in the right direction. So really, I think what you just said there is so important for people to slow down, to go fast.
Yeah.
I think I'm saving time by giving you a fast answer, but I'm leaving so many things unanswered, unaccounted for, misunderstood, that now the people I'm talking with got to go back and do that. If I take care of all those things up front, this will end faster.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great example. And I was also a trial attorney, so I understand the long setup to get to the answer. And it's not necessarily for that gotcha moment. It's for that mutual realization that we're coming to with a much more fact-rich understanding of what happened, that we're, dropping the guard and the defensiveness so that we can really get to the next level. And I love the thing that you said, I'm being so efficient, and yet you're not efficient at all. And when people walk away pissed off, I hope we can say that, when they walk away mad, pissed off, when they're just complaining and gathering around what just happened here, when they don't understand, when you come back with results that are completely lacking alignment with what the intention was, there's no effectiveness, no efficiency, and certainly no kindness, because nobody wants to show up doing their best and find out they keep getting it wrong, but only after they've delivered the wrong thing. That is absolutely the worst. So taking some time to not just gently enter the conversation, but to be really planful about how can I help the people around me succeed, and particularly for leaders, but also family members. When a few of us are successful, we're all more successful, and we're certainly more stable. So efficiency means being more planful and more clear, I think, not quick.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Efficiency should be thought of, planned around, judged by achievements, not by time in conversation. We're not on a manufacturing floor where if we can shave 30 seconds off each stage of the manufacturing process, well, we do this 1 million times a year, so that saves us $5 million. Now we're more efficient. And many times in conversations, it's actually the opposite. If I'm investing a few extra minutes, I can't talk, a few more words, now we're helping to, and I love what you said too. Not only is it not about the gotcha moment, it's actually in many ways removing the gotcha moment from it, because now we're navigating this emotional roller coaster together to get to a spot where it's okay to talk about it. So it's removing the gotcha moment from it. So often, some of my favorite moments in investigative interviewing were when people were talking about something. Could have been a victim, witness, or suspect, doesn't matter. They're talking about whatever the incident was, and they don't even realize it. Like, you can tell that they're just naturally engaging in the conversation, and it hasn't clicked yet that this is what they're talking about. And then a couple of minutes in, you see almost like a camera shutter. It's like that, oh, and then they keep going. Like, okay, I guess this is okay. This isn't what I expected. We can keep talking about it. It's just, it's really removing the gotcha moment from the conversation almost entirely, if we can get there. I feel like part of the conversation too ties back into something that I've seen you write about, which is really thinking about the unintended or unintentional effects that our delivery, our approach has on other people. And I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but in your specific work, when you're coaching executives, when you're working with teams, whether it's because somebody comes to you and says, well, that didn't go how I thought it would, or they're not listening to me, or this is what happened. How do you work with people to help them recognize that a lot of what they're getting, for better or worse, is of their own creation?
Yeah. It is a lot of their own creation, and it's also contextual, as we've mentioned that already. And there's always that subtext, particularly when there's a power disparity. And a lot of leaders aren't comfortable acknowledging that power disparity, and you've got power disparity in families as well. And they're not necessarily mom and dad that are in charge. So you kind of think about those places of disparity. How do you navigate that subtext ahead of time? So if you just acknowledge, okay, I may be a nice person with good intentions, but if I were standing in the shoes of this person, knowing what I know about them, where is the place where they might connect the dots differently than what I intend? That, because they always will connect the dots, you either connect them very deliberately for people and show them how rationally this makes sense, or you assume that they'll just trust you and don't connect the dots. And dots will be connected, but oftentimes in ways that you totally don't expect. And this is a tricky thing, because a lot of times as leaders, you may not be in a place where you can be fully transparent. Transparency is completely celebrated. And the reality is we can't be 100% transparent all the time when we've got organizational things that are shifting, things haven't been decided yet, but there's an atmosphere in the air. And I think acknowledging to the extent you can the truth of the moment. I know you're aware that there's things going on here. I'm going to share those details as soon as I can. I'm available for your questions. I may not be able to answer all of those questions, but let's focus on this. Let's deal with this. Let's solve this right now. So helping people focus in on, here are the things that we can impact. Let's do that. And I'll fill you in about what's going on as best I can and as soon as I can later. Because you've mentioned this earlier, each conversation that you have, and I mentioned connecting dots, it's really about building trust with people. Do they trust that you're going to show up with their interests in mind, their needs in mind, as best you can, as soon as you can? And this whole idea of, we're celebrating the conversation, but it's the conversation that builds the trust, that extends the relationship, that creates the results that we're all trying to achieve. So it's just kind of the foundational piece. If we're not talking to each other, we'll be talking about each other. So we might as well manage that.
I love that line. If we're not talking to each other, we're talking about each other. I like that line a lot.
Yeah,
it is so true. And again, so many things that I think are right on the nail there. And especially when it comes to building trust with people, trust is based on experience. So we can say, trust me, we can feel like we're doing what we said we would, but unless we give people experiences that fit their expectations to prove that we're trustworthy over time, they're just not going to trust us. And I found your point about the transparency piece to be especially important for senior leaders. I mean, it can be at any level, but especially senior leaders. I'm sure for you, especially coming from an HR and legal background, my wife is an HR executive. Like, you just can't open the door and say, okay, I know there's been rumors about why so-and-so lost their job. Let me tell you what she really did, how long it was going on, and all the evidence that we had before we made that decision. Like, part of doing that job is just sucking it up, that people are going to start rumors. There's nothing we can do about it. We do the best we can and move on. I feel like for somebody like in your roles, you learn that over time. But for many leaders out there in the business, whether they're operations, sales, finance, whatever, it can be hard for them to do that because it's not such a common part of their job that they feel like, well, they don't trust me, they misunderstand me. Well, to your point, let's be transparent to the point that we can.
Yeah.
Let's tie decisions to their outcomes. Let's give them a chance to be heard. Let's tie something to their underlying motivation, deal with that, and then move forward. So there's lots of other options to make this progress without having to say, well, you're right. Let me go get my investigation file and show this all to you.
Yeah. And, different people will accept different levels of what you can provide. But one of the things that I share with leaders a lot to say in those situations where someone comes wanting more information about what happened, and you can say, here are the things that I can share about this situation, but I also have a responsibility to just be discreet about some of this information in exactly the same way I would be discreet about anyone asking for information about you or your performance or any of that. So then that, even while you're saying no, you're actually building trust, and you're also establishing your brand as someone who's trustworthy and discreet about private, important information. And those little moments with one person are the things that create that brand, because that's the person that will go back and say, you can trust that person because I do, or because I had this situation and this is how they handled it. So I think a mistake people think, particularly in a leadership or in a corporate kind of role or community role, is my conversation with this one person only goes this far. And it's like, huge ripple effect. This is your brand, your reputation, one conversation at a time. So how do you want to show up? Even in something, frequently people say, I just don't have the time right now. This isn't that important to me. Those things become your brand. So everything that comes to you, this works better for some than others, but I said, just imagine every little concern that comes your way shows up in a Tiffany blue box with a bow on it. That's your gift that day for you to decide how you want to thank them for coming forward with it and what you do with it to honor that gift that they've given you. For someone else, it might be, tickets to the Super Bowl. Insert great value gift as you wish, but it is a gift when people come to you. Don't blow it.
A Guinness glass might work for me, but I get your analogy completely. My wife would land very, very well with her.
I imagine, yeah.
But your point about it being a gift is correct, of course. And to your point, I feel like a lot of people don't recognize that how people perceive them as leaders is often directly related to how people perceive them as listeners. Mm-hmm. Their degrees on the wall don't count. The years of experience don't count. The title doesn't count. How much money they brought in for the organization doesn't count. Their engineering expertise doesn't count. I mean, all these things go into it. But if we are leading a group of people, which at least for now, that's what we're doing, then they're going to value in many ways our leadership based on how they perceive our ability to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about the confidential information piece. Wow, was that so hard for me to say? I honestly believe that in several stops in my career, that my reputation, hopefully as a successful investigator and somebody that people would talk to, wasn't built as much on the information I got. It was the information I didn't share. And finding ways to let the truth come to light without having to say, well, I talked to Tucker yesterday and here's everything she told me and here's everything I already know. So now you may as well just tell me the truth. And so being able to encourage people to share information because they trusted that I would find strategic ways to employ that to get what I needed without selling them out, so to speak.
Right.
I think that's something, and it's a point that you made, that leaders can certainly take advantage of in many different ways in their career. But like you said, if I say to somebody, I don't have time for this, what I'm really saying is it's not important to me as it is to you. Well, how well I handle this right now might stop you from coming in the next 3 times, because now you're confident in how either you can handle it or how I will address it at the right point. So it's not spending time, it's investing time.
That's right. And everything that you just said reminds me of the Maya Angelou quote that so many of us have heard, but people may not remember what you said or didn't say, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that's gold for leaders, because even if your role is operational or financial, you're creating all kinds of emotional reactions all the time. So finding ways to give people a positive experience of you and your concern for them is one of the most powerful levers that leaders have. But it's not necessarily what we spend time teaching them when they're getting their MBA.
No, we teach them how to read a balance sheet and how to make formulaic decisions and how to problem solve, hopefully, but how to lead people or connect with people, especially with varying levels of interest and expertise and experience, and all of these things tends to fall behind. I did notice that you talk about, and if I've got this wrong, tell me, you're never going to hurt my feelings. I think, is it a 4-step cycle to resolving conflicts?
I do have that 4-step cycle, but I think what you might be referring to, because I don't have that cycle necessarily in the book, but I do have four conversations that every leader should focus on mastering.
Perfect.
And I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but
I'm going to say yes, so I look a lot smarter than I am, and I love where we're going.
Well, it comes immediately to the top of mind because it relates so much to what we've been talking about. How am I talking about performance? And in my book, I have a lot of forward phrases to start talking about performance. And performance is different than conduct. So when we talk about performance, it's what am I achieving? conduct is, how am I getting there? And oftentimes we presume everybody knows how to behave. We're all adults here. Just do what I do. Not all that clear. And moving from one organization to another, or moving into a hybrid work environment after we've been together all the time, there are a lot of invisible cultural expectations that need to be transparently spoken about. So performance and conduct, then feedback. How am I doing? Are you giving that information? And then finally, support. What support do you need? What support do I need? How do we support each other? How do we support the team? So thinking beyond just our individual performance or conduct, now how do we support the overall goal and the community that we find ourselves in? So those are the 4 areas that I really think, if leaders are deliberate in thinking about that, that can really help. And do you think about those in a family context? They work the same way. I've raised kids. I'm on to grandkids now, and which took me a while to be able to say, but I didn't even stutter when I said it. So, you think about performance. What are we going to do? How are we doing it? Did you thank so-and-so when they gave you whatever? And then how do we support each other? And here's some feedback. Here's what I noticed. Here's how it's going. So those 4 pieces, if you're very deliberate about addressing it, that often not only navigates through conflict, it will avoid a lot of conflict.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if I go in expecting conflict, then I'm more than likely to say or do or something to inadvertently create it. If I go in focused on the outcome, then I'm more than likely going to say something intentionally or inadvertently to achieve that outcome. And I thought it was a great differentiation between performance and conduct, because I do see how those 2 things can be confused. My performance might be great. I'm hitting all the metrics, but I'm a jerk to be around. That's a separate problem. Or I could be the nicest guy in the world, but I'm falling short of my metrics. So that's very important there.
Yes.
But I also feel like tying feedback and support together are important. And I'm going to dangerously maybe dip my toes in one of the careers that you had previously. But if I'm giving somebody feedback and not offering or building in some potential support, that I'm not offering them feedback, I'm building a case against them. And they know that.
Yeah.
So if I'm not at all offering some sort of tangible, whether it's from me, whether it's from somebody else, whether it's another resource, whatever it is, if I'm giving feedback because I want somebody to change, because if they do, they will be better for themselves, they will be better for their team, they'll be better for the organization, all of these things. Why wouldn't I find some support to help reinforce and educate the way we want things done and why? If we're not offering the support, then we're building a case. And if we're building a case, then...
That's right. And I think there's a place for curiosity to discover what is that support, because I remember having a challenge with, this is back in the day when I was practicing law, I had an assigned secretary. I don't think that happens very much anymore, but I did. And there were some issues with the assigned secretary not performing. And so they gave me a computer. It's like, was that support? That wasn't the issue. That was a shut up and, do it yourself kind of solution. So I think with support, it's important to find out what is the genesis of the issue. Is it a lack of understanding? Is it we're shorthanded? Is it a software issue? There could be any number of things where curiosity would be where I would go to first. But let me come back to feedback, because all the examples that you gave were about how I'm setting this person up. But feedback means also taking the time to celebrate the wins. What went well? If you want people to keep performing well, make sure they know what well looks like. And I think we kind of assume, well, they have to know. It's so obvious. I once was working in a company, and I was waiting to go into a meeting, and I was standing outside this meeting with the executives, and I was standing outside with these 2 folks that when the executives opened the door and they started kind of marching out, someone said, "Hey, we were just talking about you in the meeting." And the one guy that I'm standing next to says, "Oh, that's cool." And someone else gave him a high five and, we were really excited about what you did, high five, and they walked out. And the other guy who was just watching this, I was watching this, said, "Well, that's really, really cool. But what was it that you did?" And the guy that was getting all the high fives said, "I don't know, but I hope I keep doing it." Now that's a major miss, because that's a role model employee who doesn't know what he's doing well or being recognized for. That could have been a lesson not only for him, but anyone else, like the guy standing next to him. So I think with feedback, reminding people, it's not just looking for opportunities to critique. It's looking for opportunities to celebrate and showcase, because this becomes the model that other people are going to look to.
Oh, that's a great point. A great point. Keep reinforcing the behavior, the actions, the outcomes,
Yes.
the conduct, if you will, that we want to have continue. So it will. It might have been an accident before. Let's make sure it's intentional. And so that's a great call out. We're trying to keep an eye on the clock here, and I don't want to take over your entire afternoon. You've mentioned your book a couple of times. You've mentioned the coaching that you do a couple of times. For the people that are listening to this conversation, they're enjoying it, they're learning from it, they want to connect with you. Where can people go to connect with you and continue to learn from you?
I have my book right here. So here's the first 4 words. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or at other independent booksellers. I have a website, onwardleadership.com, where you can learn more about my work. I do workshops and training, as well as executive coaching and speaking. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to have people send me a message. I'd love to meet them. Happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. And I'll put all those links in the show notes, so people don't have to go hunting for the book, hunting for your website, hunting for your LinkedIn. They'll be right here. So to connect with Tucker, go to the show notes, click the link, one-stop shopping. We'll make it easy for you. It's been a pleasure meeting and speaking with you today. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. I love the approach. I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Michael.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tucker, thank you so much for a great conversation. Again, I really appreciate you sharing both your time and your expertise. Thank you so very much for giving us a window into your work, your approach, and how it can be so helpful. I love how you said gratitude is the grease. We can talk about all kinds of techniques that work, but it's amazing what we can achieve when we're actually nice to people. We show them respect and help them protect their self-image. I also love when you said, if we're not talking to each other, we're talking about each other. So we should probably spend more time talking to each other. I thought that was a great line. And overall, your theme on kindness and respect and building trust throughout the approach, I thought was so valuable. I really appreciate all that you shared today. Thank you so very much. And of course, thank you to everybody that took the time to listen to another episode with us today. We truly appreciate it. Thank you for coming back week after week. If you haven't already, please take just a quick second, like the show, share the show, subscribe to the podcast, let your friends know about it. We really appreciate you. Keep coming back. Give us your feedback. Would you like to hear more or less of? We'd love to hear it. And of course, before you get off the internet today, check out our sponsors. Head over to humantel.com. Check out their best in class online training in order to identify when emotions are shifting in the context of the situation by recognizing changes in facial expressions and nonverbal communication. Enter the code INCLUSIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice. For the professional interviewers, please head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. Get all your questions answered about both the International Association of Interviewers and the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. That's over at certifiedinterviewer.com. And while you're online, please check out inclusive.com to learn more about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more, to teach them how to uncover hidden value in all of their high-stakes conversations. We really appreciate you being here again. Thank you so very much. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.